TE Talks with Guides is a weekly podcast for lovers of history, travel, and all things Italian. Thanks for returning to TE Talks with me, Rob, your host, and I have Federica joining us today. Ciao, Federica.
Ciao.
So today, everybody, we're going to be doing something interesting. I'm excited because I won't be giving the interview. We're going to have Federica give the interview to me because we're going to be talking about, since it's Holy Week, it's the week before Easter, we're doing a special emphasis on the Vatican, of course. And I have just developed St. Peter's Basilica virtual tour. So Federica, please feel free to take over and start the interview.
Oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm having this flashback of us 8 years ago in your office during my interview to get the job. Now it's nice to, to have the other thing around me asking you questions.
The role reversal.
In fact. So now, first of all, it was great. Actually, we had the chance to watch your virtual tour, which is a 2-episode virtual tour. And of course, it's very important to stress that fact because, in my opinion, you made an incredible job in designing your tour perfectly. So a big, interesting focus on the history of the Basilica, and then an incredible description of what it looks like right now when you go and visit it. And I think that Grace Lynn was the one that came up with a joke, and she told us that it took 120 years for both the Basilica and your tour, right? She was Grace Lynn.
Yes.
It's a very giggish joke. I mean, we laughed a lot, but and I understand the reason why it took so long for this project. And can you tell us the reason why a virtual tour dedicated to St. Peter's Basilica is such a challenge?
Okay, sure, absolutely. That's a great question, and to kind of like put a picture for everybody is that when we started doing these tours, we needed to get them done up as quick as possible. So I was like jumping on everybody. You and you were one of the quickest, or Luca or Mario. Mario did his Sistine Chapel at a weekend. Everyone was doing them up and quickly, but it did take a while. It took a year for me finally to be able to take the time to sit down and do it. But why did it take such a long time? And also the context that the church was took 120 years to build, and just as long it took me to develop the tour. That was a joke. It took a long time because I realized that to do it justice, it couldn't just be like walking through the church we see today. And I was learning more and more about the original Basilica, and I was fascinated by it. I mean, because we're guides, a great thing is to get a wonderful book and learn new things, because it just invigorates us, right? It's like, oh my God, now I have a new point of view to talk about, to share with people, and it affects everything else of how I set my structure of what I'm going to talk about. And so the idea to lightly touch upon or ignore almost the original Basilica by Constantine, when it was the most important religious spot for well over 1,000 years for people. I mean, people couldn't go to Jerusalem. The Church of St. Peter's by Constantine was the spot that people would go. And the fact is that a lot of the Church of St. Peter's today is from the old church. And so there's that picture to get connected to it. That's why it did take so long, I think.
Very good. And can I be honest with you? When you said, I'll take care of St. Peter's tour, we were like, oh, yes, you do that. I mean, that was really scary just hearing about that. So we were all very relieved, let's say so. And, of course, the mission of our virtual tours is not replacing the experience in person in the church with a virtual experience, because we know that this cannot be done because they are two different things. And we actually worked on our virtual tours thinking that they are two different things. So we need to provide two different kinds of service, right? So what are the things that you can actually do during a virtual tour that you cannot do during a tour in person in the Basilica?
Many things, and that's a very valid point. That because I find because we as guides, we know so many images, so many different aspects that if you take images or if you take, sometimes guides do this, but I found when I would take a book, first of all, it'd kill my back, or an iPad, it doesn't give the same emphasis, and that clients tended not to want to look at that because they had all of this around them. They wanted to look at what was around them, not to focus on a book. But when you have a virtual tour, you have the computer in front of you, you have the image. So it's almost like you're a director of a play or film, and you can
Yeah.
bring out that story with these images. Case in point, I would always touch on the fact that the Pietà by Michelangelo was attacked, but you didn't really emphasize it too much. But then in the research, I was able to discover they had a photograph of Laszlo Toth, the man who attacked it. They have the photograph of him attacking it. They have the photographs afterwards. Very powerful stuff to show. I mean, it's very heartbreaking to me. It never dawned on me how devastating it was when that happened. And the fact then to show it being in perfect condition still afterwards was, this kind of triumph, I thought, of the faith of these people, how important it was. It was because I'm always moved by that statue whenever I see it.
Yeah.
So that stuff, or the artist recreations of what these things look like, because the old Church of St. Peter's, we have no idea. Well, we do have an idea because of what the artists have done, but I couldn't show that on a tour itself. You tried to describe, but here you have wonderful keys to realize this stuff.
Yeah, I do agree, because we are very famous in Rome because we are, I think, the only company that spends more than 5 hours in the Vatican for the museums and the Sistine Chapel and the Basilica. But still, when you reach the church, you don't have that much time to go in depth with certain aspects that are actually composing the DNA of that place. So when you are there in person with the crowds and microphones and the confusion surrounding you, you feel like you're missing so much, and the people with you are missing so much. So this is what I think about your virtual tour, that it's an incredible occasion. Even if you've been there, it's an incredible occasion to shine light on certain aspects that, for given reasons, you cannot analyze while you're there on spot. So this is probably what I appreciate the most about your virtual tour. Can I ask you why you chose St. Peter's Basilica? Is that your favorite monument?
Okay, yeah, it's yes, it's one of my favorite monuments. I mean, I think we all have a different kind of relationship with certain monuments. Maybe we have more of affinity to, or maybe we kind of like it one year and don't like it the next year. I don't like the Colosseum as much per se because of what it symbolized, but of course, then if I get involved in the construction, the magnificence, or how it's well preserved. But yeah, definitely St. Peter's. To touch on a couple of things, the virtual tour, you're right. I think it's great because it's a great benefit also for people, even when we get back up on our feet again and things are back to normal, that we totally plan to offer this to people. Say, this is something that's wonderful before you do your tour, or even after you do your tour. And why do I like St. Peter's so much? Well, back in the day when we first started, so many years ago in the early 2000s, there was no way to cut the lines at the Vatican museums. No tour operator could skip it. You all had to do the line. So the way the timing worked best, we started at St. Peter's. So you would do a tour of St. Peter's. You had to do a full throttle hour-and-a-half tour, because the tour would start at 10. You would get there, get through all said and done. You'd probably be finished by noon. Then you would go in the Borgo, have a lunch break. And after, the line would be a lot shorter to go into the Vatican museums. The way it works now, because we are a recognized tour operator, we have to go into the Basilica, we have to go into the museums first and foremost. And because it's so massive, even to get through it takes time. So, it gets cut short. So there was so much that we were able to just talk about there that, we had to learn a lot about it. So because I know a lot of guides don't have that, but I did. And I loved it. I loved it. I also loved it because the history of it, the fact is that you have, these superpowers, these protagonists of history for such a long time, and the fact that are involved in the creation of the building, and also the people who came to it, the people who described it, what else could you say about it? It's just the history itself, and the fact that the building itself was a catalyst for history. You could really say that the Protestant Reformation came out of the fact that they were looking to get money to build this edifice, this massive edifice. So on so many levels, and of course, even in the ancient world, all time periods, because of course we go into the Scavi too, that all of that stuff just, as you were saying, maybe people didn't want to touch on it, and that's why it took so long, but it was those reasons that I love St. Peter's.
And do you remember your first time there? I mean, because I am Italian, and I've been there so many times as a student, when I was a kid with my parents and my family. So I miss that. I don't remember my first time in St. Peter's Basilica. It has always been there for me, so I don't remember this experience. Do you?
I do. I remember it because I saw the Pietà. When I saw the Pietà inside, I was backpacking, through Europe. So that was 1996. I was probably 24, turning 24, doing this backpack trip. And I remember, going through the square. You could just walk right up to the church. You didn't have to do the security measures that were started after 2001. I remember that it was, there was the first time I had an emotional reaction to a statue. I was very moved, almost to tears, when I saw the Pietà. And I had known about the statue because a friend of mine in my university, they had done a short play where the last scene was that she comes in as but Carmen Miranda with a bunch of fruit on her head, and she acts like that.
Okay.
It's like, this gay hairdresser guy comes in. They have this discussion, but the last scene of it is that he's dying, and she holds him in her arms, like the Pietà. So I always had that, and I wanted that role. I didn't get it, but I wanted the role. But I remembered that, and then I was like, okay, I really want to see it. And then I saw it, and I saw it surrounded by hundreds of people, but it was so powerful. I guess I know that you, in your virtual tour, you talk about Michelangelo's work a lot, because you do Moses. Yeah. I just felt like, wow, this is the soul of the artist that was coming through to me. And so, that made, I've never forgotten that. So that, and I have to associate that. It's like, I did not walk by that when I walked through, and I felt the power of the church. I remember being very scared of Pius XII. I was like, wow, that guy's really frightening looking. And now I realize, he's an interesting character in history, not always frightening, a very powerful figure during the Second World War, controversial sometimes. That had a great impact on me. The size of it, and trying to, be overwhelmed by that. And then, thinking maybe it lacked a little bit of spirituality, but the spirituality I found after, that's what I discovered after. But I also remember I was looking for the Moses. I thought it was in there, and I couldn't find it. And of course, when you're trying to find something, you think it's in this massive place, it'll take you a long time. And then the colonnade, when it lined up, I remember taking pictures, because I believe it was I went to St. Peter's is one of the last places I went to on my first trip to Rome before I went off to Greece, and it was St. Peter's was the last thing I saw. So I definitely remember it.
Well, a great way to say goodbye to the city, I guess.
Yeah, it was.
Talking about searching for the Moses in St. Peter's Basilica, when I was in New York the first time in the Grand Central Station, I was looking for the famous staircase of, what is the name of that movie that is actually in Chicago, it's not in New York. So I asked that question, and someone looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I just, switched the CDs. But
you're talking about like in the Untouchables?
Like the Untouchables, yes. Oh my
Where they
God.
have like he's holding the baby carriage and he's trying to save it.
Yeah, exactly. And I stopped the guard. Then I asked, the famous movie with the staircase and the people falling down. It's not here. It's in Chicago. Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, yeah, you get confused when you are a tourist. But this, like, I always feel like at the airport, they, do something to you, so your brain stops working when you are on holiday. So you just ask stupid questions, do stupid things. But that's the reason why it's so fun, because you have no control. Now, what is the aspect of your virtual tour that you are the most proud of?
I think it's the structure of it. Where I start, because always with the guides, I always talk about when we're doing a presentation, be it virtual tour or be it a regular tour, it's so important to have your argument, your beginning, the whole storyline, and then a conclusion. When you're giving a tour itself, you are obliged to follow the itinerary that we have to take. Go to the museums first, hit the Pinacoteca, and you adapt accordingly. But with the virtual tours, like when Grayson does the Palatine Hill tour, she could do it chronologically. I did it partially chronologically, but then I had to deal with the structure itself. And it took me a long time, but I felt really happy about it because, we deal with the martyrdom of Peter. We figure out where he was martyred, why the church was there, the confusion about where he could have been martyred, and later on, definitively where he was martyred, and that Constantine builds the structure on that. And then we go to the old church, define it, talk about then the construction of the new church. And that's part one. And then the real challenge was, as you said, the reality, the real pictures of what we see today. And I was like, okay, how do I address that? So I start from the dome being finished. Then I finally go inside the dome and then go to the Bernini pillars, pull us out again, do the square, and then finally now we go through. But then I end it with the beginning, the tomb of Peter, and the excavation. So it's like you go from the beginning and take you back to the beginning at the end. I like that.
But that was exactly the thing I loved the most about, watching your virtual tour, because of course, I know that place and I know how an ordinary tour is usually structured. So the portico and then the doors, and you go inside, and then the pieta and blah, blah, blah. Everything is, has a certain order, let's say. So, but with your tour, you actually go up and then down and then out and then in again, and then all the way down, back on the surface. And that is what is really exciting, in my opinion. That is not boring for a person that has been there, because you move constantly in and out, up and down, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I loved what you did with pictures, and I loved what you did with your videos, because there are some videos that are just extraordinary. My favorite one is the one of the well, I don't want to spoil it, but you will see an incredible video that is just so amazing, and you will understand how important electricity is in the modern times. So you will get that. And my question is, how many books did you have to read for the first time or read again for your virtual tour?
Oh, God. Okay, so let's, funny enough, I found a lot of resources. I started with the images. I wrote a list of, okay, what do I want to talk about? So I wrote that list, and then I started looking for the images. Inevitably, a lot of these images led me to blogs, a lot of interesting blogs, because, okay, so we come with already a whole set knowledge, but what was so important for me were two specific books and then a list of these blogs. I had 30 blogs for the first church and 30 blogs for the new church. And then the books, the book of the old Church of St. Peter's by the British School. It was wonderful. And we can, put it up on an image for people to see it. It was oh my God, it was over 400 pages. Some chapters were difficult because it was each chapter was written by a different scholar. So some of it was fascinating, and others where I was like, oh my God. It was about the liturgical process of what was going on. You're like, oh my God, this is not helping me for my tour. I don't need to read this. And then this other one, Oh yeah, no, there are three. The other one was the book about the necropolis. There's this wonderful bookstore at St. Peter. So if you are looking at the facade, imagine to the left, where there's a wonderful place to take
Yeah.
photographs of the Swiss Guard. There is a bookstore right there. And that's where I found two of these books. And so I went there, I was there with Grayson recently, and I said, do you guys have a book just about the necropolis? She's like, sure. It's like the most thorough book about the ancient necropolis and the grottos underneath. It was just perfect. And then, where I got a lot of my images was from that book of St. Peter, all in Italian. That was the one I used to carry around until it started breaking my back because it's huge. It's just without a doubt the most beautiful book of St. Peter's. That's where in the tomb of Paul III with his grouchy looking mother, we can't see it, but she's looking in a mirror, and then they had a photograph in the mirror of her face. So her face was carved. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And in fact, you wonder why is it that they would do that work when no one could possibly really get that close to the high altar, because his monument is right up in the apse of the church.
Yeah.
But of course, we know as guides, and we don't really talk about it because it's just going to make like liquid come out of people's ears. But a lot of these funerary monuments were moved all over the place. So where the pier of St. Andrew is, where his statue is, that's where that was supposed to be. So obviously, you could have been looking and seeing her face inside the mirror and being a big show off, quite dramatic. So definitely, those are the three main books that helped me without a doubt.
Very good. And did you learn something new about the Basilica, even if you have been visiting, studying, and working there for, ages?
Yeah. A couple of things that I thought were really cool that I didn't go too much into on the tour itself is the connection. And that's why I was very specific about the videos that I use. But the fact is that the power of music and the word, the spoken word and the written word, which of course is very powerful in the church itself. And so I thought that would be the perfect thing to start. And I when I was discovering about the inscription Tu es Petrus, I wanted to use that as the first words, but then I even found this choir music that specifically uses those words. And then I also, we all have our idea of what, we know what St. Peter's looks like. And I made this choice in the beginning to not show the church, because my emphasis was going to be the old church in the beginning. So I wanted for everyone in their own imaginations to start to create it, not just to have the famous picture of the facade and the dome. And because it worked so well, I'll be frank, remember, everyone else, not only did it take me a long time, but I was adamant about people making sure that their tour would last an hour or maximum an hour and 10 minutes. And then when I finally had the courage to get it all done, and I did it for 3 guides, it was over 2 hours. It was over 2 hours. And so that's when we're like, okay, let's just do part 1 and part 2. And then the first, when you guys all saw the first part and it worked so well, I tried to reincorporate it and do it with the second part. And then I found Gregorian chants. There was this interesting streamlined video inside St. Peter's with that music of the Gregorian chant playing. I thought that was wonderful too. So yeah, I did love to use the music.
Yeah, because it really helps you feeling in the church, even if you're not there. I can tell you that sometimes when I'm doing tours in the Basilica, sometimes the organ starts playing and I see the expression of the people that changes in a second, because music gives you an incredible atmosphere, so immersive, so beautiful. So this is actually another thing that I really liked about your virtual tour. And what is actually the thing you like the most in there? You told me about the Pietà by Michelangelo, but what is your special thing in St. Peter's Basilica?
Longinus.
Probably many Longinus statue.
Yeah, beautiful. There are many different things, but I love it so much for its power, its majesty. And I think in the context of the church, maybe people don't emphasize it too much. I don't know if a lot of guides, do you talk about Longinus at all when you give?
Yes. Yes, I do, because people think that the basilica is all about the bones of Saint Peter and Saint Peter and Saint Peter. But when you are standing right in front of the main altar, you are basically surrounded by relics, and you have the Veronica's veil, and you have the pieces of the Holy Cross, and then the spear of Longinus. So it's a way for me to tell them this is probably the most sacred place for the Catholic Church, because you are completely surrounded by sacred things and sacred relics. Yes, I do.
Yeah, see, that's fascinating. I also talk about that too. But for me, like I love that statue. I think it because we've referred to this person of Bernini, Gian Lorenzo Bernini, so much, it almost becomes like, oh, he did this, he did this, he did this, he did this, he did this.
Mm-mm-mm.
But what he's really known for, I mean, what his mastery was as a sculptor. But I love to put him into such a different context from the Pietà from Michelangelo. These two greats, when I have read, they've compared them on a similar level, but such a different realization of things, and that he's a show off, and the fact that the surface of the statue isn't smooth, it's just very powerful to me. I love it. I love the Renaissance, and I love the Baroque, and I think I think that's a definite great symbol of what the Baroque is, and his mastery, that I don't think people necessarily, they know more about his statues that he did when he was younger on your virtual tour of the Galleria Borghese, which are amazing, but this, in this context of such a huge building, and I think it's not always talked about on that level. So I love to do that and show the bees, because we're all over the place, Barberini bees. So yeah, that's my favorite place, I would say, inside the church.
And in your virtual tour, you also talk about the sort of competition between him and his enemy, Borromini, that is a person that I never mention when I go to St. Peter's Basilica. And I feel really bad about that, because if I had to be honest, I really like Borromini. I like Bernini. I love what he did, for example, for the Borghese statues.
Mm-hmm.
But as a person, it's not my cup of tea. I prefer the shy and sad and depressed and moody Borromini. But I never mentioned him. I don't want my guests to get depressed. You know what I mean? So, sure. You're visiting another city. You are in a beautiful place. But in your virtual tour, you actually talk about this competition between Bernini and Borromini, and this is something that I really loved. And can you tell us something more about the canopy and what happened there?
Yeah, sure. No, what's really interesting, that was a story that I learned later on, I think, in the last few years, and I never knew. We always talk about, as guides, a competition between Bernini and Borromini, but that was a story. I think that's where this animosity towards each other really, really started. And as you said, Bernini wasn't a great personality. I think he kind of regretted that towards the end of his life. They say he got to be much more spiritual, but this idea of this guy. I also love the fact that there was a guide who was from Mirabilia Urbis, Silvia. She's wonderful. Yeah. And the way she just described him, she's like, he was like Johnny Depp. And I was like, oh, of course he was like Johnny Depp. So he was like this gorgeous man.
He actually looked like Johnny Depp.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Like, he was he was a ladies' man. He had his way with many, many ladies. He got himself into a lot of trouble, but because he was very powerful, he was vicious, but he was gorgeous, shirt open, like, doing like do you remember the bust, the famous bust? I don't remember her name. It was a wife. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Costanza Bonarelli, the one that is in Florence.
Yes, and I think they had that exhibit, and they had that bust because it's one of the few ones he's done of a woman. But it was a wife of one of the people who worked in his workshop, and so he slept with her. And then when he finds out that his brother also slept with her, that he cuts her face, but he did a bust of her, but he cuts her face, and he has his brother banished from Rome. You're like, whoa, okay. And so then you kind of understand the frustration. So with the canopy, it also kind of emphasized, it helped with the structure of the story, because with that story, then you understand that he's not a genius necessarily when it comes to architecture, but Borromini was, and Borromini said,
Yeah.
the problems that you have to worry about. And then since he just screwed him over, later on, it bit him back, karma's a bitch, let's just say, with the towers.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Fantastic. Yeah, the bust you're referring to is just one of the most beautiful, portraits of a woman I have ever seen in my entire life. Because you see that he really, really liked her, but their relationship was a bit, complicated. And you see her shirt opening and showing a beautiful breast. It's just the most beautiful thing. And you're right when you say that it was displayed in this exhibition dedicated to Bernini that took place in the Borghese Gallery, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And you could see this beautiful marble bust, and next to it, the self-portrait of Bernini. So it was beautiful to see their two lovely faces, next to each other. It was very, very beautiful. And then, of course, you have the Longinus, and then you have the beautiful bronze canopy. And then when you look up, you have the dome. So we have Michelangelo. And so we don't have Michelangelo just in the first chapel on the right with the Pietà, but you also have this amazing dome that is also the main protagonist of 2 works of mine that will probably be, published on our YouTube channel, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, this week we're going to be doing that, because we did those TE Walks live, and it was so funny because I remember after you said, you really liked my tour after you did my virtual tour, and you're like, oh, I have to rip up my badge as a guide, I have to learn it over again. That's what I felt when I watched your tours inside the dome. I was like, oh my God, because I had done the, walks outside the piazza. But I mean, it was brilliant to me. It seemed so well structured, so thought out. And the fact is that you were talking about stuff while you're going up the stairs. It's just...
You know what? I was dying. I was breathing with every pore of my skin, trying to survive. It was incredible because I haven't been climbing those steps for so long now because of what's happening. So when I found myself climbing those steps once again, after months and months of, TV and, eating Italian food and blah, 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 I was like, oh my God, what happened to me? I mean, I don't recognize my body, but yeah, it's cool. It was really cool.
Well, let's just say this is great, because there's something I talk about in our introduction with our podcast is about how guides have conversations and talk about exhibits. So here we are. This is a perfect example of us talking about the Bernini exhibit. And I love how you say, as a woman, you can see a man's caring for it, because Bernini was magnificent when it came to busts and marble portraits that people don't talk about as well. So I find all of that so interesting, and I think this is the reason why we're doing these podcasts. And I want to thank you for helping me out and setting
thank you for giving me the chance to ask you questions. Exactly. It was beautiful.
Now, let me ask you, because this is another segment that we do on the podcast, is that if we could give from you guys your expert opinion on a travel tip. So a TE travel tip, a through eternity travel tip. What would you like to share with people? Some helpful travel tip for them?
Well, sometimes you can travel in a specific moment of the year, and sometimes you have no choice. So, for example, you have a break from work on July or on August. So that's when you have to travel. But if you have the chance to choose and to plan, carefully and in a free way your trip to Rome, try to come here when the time is right. I mean, weather-wise. I mean, in Rome it's never too cold, but it can be definitely too hot. I remember this person, he was from Canada, and he was joining my tour in the Forum on August. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to sue you because this is not legal to take a person from Canada to the top of the Palatine Hill when you have 100 degrees. And I said, I'm sorry. And I'm making you pay for that. So I'm even more cruel. But anyway, so coming to Rome when the weather is right is absolutely important, because the heat, the summer heat, can take so much away from your experience. I mean, Rome is beautiful. So of course, even if you're just sweating, you don't care. But if you have the chance to come here on October, for example, it would be perfect.
October.
I got married on October, and that was an incredible day because it doesn't rain so often. So you have this beautiful weather, this incredible golden light when the sun sets. It's absolutely gorgeous. The temperature is just perfect. And I think that will be something that you definitely want to do. I mean, coming here when the weather is sweet, when the light is fantastic, and when you have also less people visiting Rome, which is another good thing for you.
That's right. Yeah, because sometimes people are obliged with their families and their kids that they go into the summer.
Yeah, sometimes you have no choice, but if you can plan your, trip to Rome in a free way, well, I will come to Rome on October, the first weeks of November. That is still a good, moment to come.
Yeah, I think that's a very important and valid point on many levels. One is that people need to realize that when they are traveling, you could think, okay, I'm in New York or Southern California. It's hot all the time. I'm used to it. But the difference is that you have to go to museums. A lot of places are outside. A lot of places are not air conditioned, and you are outside a lot. The sun in the Mediterranean is very powerful. So if you're physically walking a lot, you're out in hot areas, there's not a lot of opportunity to necessarily cool off. It makes a big difference. I mean, we always, the way the clients are, they're just more tired. I mean, it's always, as you say, it's beautiful to go to, but if you could decide on a certain time of year, October definitely for Rome is wonderful. Late September, October, April, May. It can sometimes be beautiful or it can be horrible, but that is important, I think, also for travel in general, because I went to Tokyo in August and it was like a tropical jungle. I will never do that again. I will go the spring or the fall. That's when I would go.
Yeah, because the thing is, and now I will sound like my grandmother, it's not about the heat, it's about humidity. And in Rome, humidity just kills you. So yeah, I say October. October is the best.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview for us, Federica. It's such a pleasure. And we're going to be talking later on in the future about some other interesting things, like, of course, the Galleria Borghese, or we'll talk about Moses, which are your lovely virtual tours. And then I get to ask you questions and interview you. And so everybody, just remember that this is a podcast that if you have listened to the podcast and you've enjoyed it, to write a review for us and give it a 5-star review. That would be very helpful, and share it around with people. And if you are interested in maybe seeing things like the pieces of artwork that we mentioned or the figures that we've mentioned, we are going to insert these images because this is a recorded conversation over Zoom. So we're going to be putting that on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will be able to see this as well. And all right, well, thanks a lot, Federica. I look forward to having more conversations with you on TE Talks with Guy.
Me too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to our TE Talks with Guides. We have a new episode every Wednesday. Please subscribe to get an alert when each podcast comes out. Rate us and tell people how you enjoyed it, and share it on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Most importantly, if you enjoyed it, send us a feedback about the show. Also, if you are curious about what some of these people and places we talked about look like, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video on this podcast, where we have inserted special images for you to further enjoy the story.